Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Hello and welcome to another zany episode of Nerdy West Coast Swing, the podcast with pixels where the anchors are out of this world and the points don't matter. We're here to help train your eyes so you can learn faster and dance better. I'm Cassie Winter.
I'm Alicia Marshall. If you're wondering who are we to be analyzing these pros, Cassie and I both have extensive training and experience in both partnered and solo dancing. Cassie has about 23 years and I have about 25. Tonight we are taking a look at, it's kind of a part two for what we've done before. Not too long ago, we took a look at how to slow down your lead as a follow, and we are doing the opposite tonight. We're taking a look at Ben Morris and Stacey K.
And just as a quick little preamble before we actually watch the video, there are kind of two types of follows that you can experience as a leader where you feel like they're either moving too fast, they're rushing, or their strides are too long. I want to just emphasize that Stacey isn't off time. She dances with long strides, which look absolutely gorgeous on her. But in order to lead that well, for it to still look like West Coast Swing, there are some things you have to take into account. And what's great is these things also help with follows who are rushing the timing and who are rushing out of their anchors. So I just wanted to preface that because Stacey is gorgeous and we absolutely love this dance.
Yeah,
Link is in the chat.
One of my favorites.
It's so good. Link is in the chat. Go ahead and watch both songs, and when you're done, we'll get to analyzing.
Yeah, that's definitely, I think, my favorite dance of Stacey's.
I know, it's so good.
She makes really good choices.
It's so good.
Very much like displays her skill in not an overt way. It's just really nice.
Love it so much. Before we get into the frame by frame analysis of each song, I want to talk about just overall some of the tools in the toolbox as a leader to help slow down a follow or to manage the spacing if they have long strides. You focus on taking energy out of the system instead of putting energy into it, which tends to be the driving force of leaders, is we're trying to apply energy to the system to lead a follow. But when you have a follow who, like Stacey, has longer strides and can cover a lot of distance really quickly, you want to try to take energy out of the system so you're still managing your spacing well. And then if you're leading a follow who does not have the skill to manage their timing correctly and they're just kind of coming out at you out of nowhere, you have to apply the same tools to take energy out of the system and to maintain your spacing. Some of the things that you can do to do that is keeping a really calm hand and center counterpoint. You can use hitch timing, and like Ben uses hitch timing pretty much these entire two songs in the hand to lead ones. It's really cool. We're going to look at that tonight. Another thing is staying in closed position as opposed to an open. You can have more trading places because the effect of a follow traveling quickly has a bigger impact when as a leader you're trading places with them. And then also have more pushes instead of passes. And that helps take energy out of the system because the follow has less time to compound their momentum. And then, like I mentioned earlier, you need to be hyper aware of your spacing. The aspect of spacing I want everyone to pay attention to the most while we're framing through is which end of the slot Stacey is on at any given time relative to Ben. And one of the things that I see leaders struggle with who are letting their follows just kind of like plow down the slot is their follow gets past them by count 2 on a pass. And on count 2, the follow should still be on the original end of the slot from where they started. So I think that is my concise preamble. I'm really proud of myself. Is there anything you want to add?
Not necessarily. Maybe the only thing that I want to mention is you said that Stacey does take longer strides, and there's a reason for that. I will point it out when we get there, but
awesome.
I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, awesome. Do the screen share. All right, so this first one, I want to highlight how Ben, after releasing the tension of the anchor, brings the hand practically straight up. And what that does is it prevents Stacey from getting too close to him. And also, because it's a face loop, it's dissolving the connection enough to make it comfortable to do a face loop. But that's actually an element that seems to get lost in face loop teaching. Like the hand needs to go straight up to dissolve the connection. But this same technique can be used at other times to prevent a follow from traveling too far in any direction simply by bringing the hand up instead of down line. This is starting to feel like a Patreon episode already. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I'm good.
Okay, cool. Cool. I'm just realizing, oh, these are notes that I do like for our patron
Yeah.
only episodes. Be excited, people. Sign up for our Patreon. All right. So for this next one, we have a trading places. So Ben is really taking advantage of the fact that Stacey takes really large strides when they're sidesteps. It's less so when she is facing straight forward and taking a step forward. Those tend to be really underneath her. But when she's taking a side step, they tend to be really large. And so Ben is doing a couple of things to really make sure the spacing is great. First of all, you can see how he's very much over here, and he's also further away from us in the camera. So there is plenty of space for Stacey to actually feel comfortable through the trading places. And you can see how Stacey's path across the floor ends up being a little bit of like a U-turn shape. But by doing a trading places, she simply cannot travel very far away from him and doesn't have enough time to really gather momentum. So trading places is a great way to take advantage of a follow with long strides. So it's really impactful, but also make sure that they're not gaining too much momentum over time.
Mm-hmm.
Also,
Yeah.
this is a little early compared to what I want to talk about, but this freeze frame is just too beautiful not to share with everyone. So good. So this is that hip catch section I was talking about earlier. And there are a couple of things that Ben is doing to really take energy out of the system to make it really gentle. And one of those things is literally just not putting that much weight into his body leads. He's putting more weight into the catch than he is to the release of the hip catch. And then the other thing that he's doing is he's making sure his hands aren't progressing any farther towards his body. His arms are staying basically outstretched from him at an angle the whole time, and his hands aren't getting any closer to his torso.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's encouraging Stacey to not travel as far and mostly like rotate in place. So I want to highlight that we're about halfway through this first song at this point, and we have not seen Ben string multiple passes together. So he's creating more opportunities for dissipating the momentum in this dance, which is a wonderful tool, not only for the situation we're talking about explicitly tonight, but also for slower songs in general to help keep the tone of your dance with your partner chill enough compared to the song. And side note, I love it when follows do that kind of around and in with their arms, because that really adds a nice weight to the hip catch part. I love it. So this is the first really clear example of a gentle center counterpoint with a hitch timing from Ben. So as he is indicating for Stacey to start posting, and he is scrolling himself away, and they have got a right to right handhold. It becomes a center counterpoint, which means the handhold itself is not traveling through space towards or away from either of them. It's staying basically posted in place. And then when he goes to lead, he doesn't actually let the body lead come through the hand until one instead of before one. So she's getting led in a hitch timing, which is continue anchoring back on one and then syncopating and two for the first two steps of your pattern as a follow. And you see she does this really lovely brush kick with her right foot right here. So that's count one, and then she syncopates right, left for and two. And this skill as a leader, to be able to lead a really subtle hitch timing through an anchor into a 1 to help a follow stay back a hair longer is a really amazing skill to have in your back pocket. And also, I can attest that as a follow, it feels really great. I love those kind of leads. They just, they're so juicy.
Erin said, say that one more time.
So basically, he is creating a hitch timing lead. So he's encouraging Stacey to continue staying anchored through and including count 1. And then he is encouraging her to step forward and 2. So her right foot is striking on the 1 and, not on 1. And then her left foot is striking on 2, like normal. And as a leader, you can vary when you basically release an anchor out of a follow. You can release it so that way they strike their foot on 1 as normal, or you can release it later so they're striking on the 1 and instead of 1. And when you have a follow who is either rushing, which is not what Stacey's doing, or has a really long stride like Stacey has, it can help to delay the release of that anchor just a little bit longer and letting yourself sit in that connection a little bit longer. And it's really helpful. Did that make sense, Erin?
You said hitch equals a nice jello stall. Got it.
Sure, I'll take it. So basically, the handhold, the center counterpoint, doesn't actually break away from its like posted point in space until the 1 and. Instead of it coming forward on 1 or slightly before 1 for the follow to strike on 1. And that delay and causing a follow to have to syncopate and dance and 2, right, left. There's only so fast you can go when you're syncopating that quickly. So it's also helping a follow slow down. All right, so this example is fun because it's like a more advanced version of trading places. But basically, Ben is taking advantage of her ability to go from point A to point B really fast. And so it's really musical. And he's essentially really gauging this foot strike with his left foot to manage the spacing between them. So that way she ends up on the other side of him comfortably, but not so far away from him that he can't reach. And I want to also highlight the way he's actually prepping it. And the way I teach an accelerated underarm, which is essentially what this is having a little bit of a swing to the center counterpoint. And that's what Ben does. So as she is rotating to the right back to face him after her anchor, he is swinging it out and up to his left. And because her frame is rotating, he's allowing his hand to rotate. And then he wants to follow through kind of with the equal and opposite swing just down the slot. And what that does is it helps the follow become really responsive to the handhold going up. And you can see right through here, even though we can't actually see the handhold, it's basically directly in front of his face as it's going straight up. So by going straight up, it's helping to slow her momentum that she's built so that way she has control out the other end of it. And if it weren't going straight up, if it were coming straight at her, ow. And if it were going down the slot even further, even Stacey couldn't make it. So going straight up is really important. Here, I will just hold forward so you can see it a little bit smoother. And I would say the only reason why there's just like a little bit of hesitation in the connection is because she's syncopating quick underneath her body. Otherwise, I think it would have been an even faster hit based on what Ben was leading. Oh, to have functioning knees. Also, I love Ben is just like so stoked about what just happened as she comes up out of this, because right as his face passes her, he's like, yeah. Agreed.
I also want to talk for a second about her choice that she makes on the exit of that. And it's not really relevant to what we're talking about, but
Oh, no worries. So what part of the exit is she already like
when
coming
she
up out
comes up.
Okay.
So because of the way that she's moving through this, she has potentially a lot of momentum right in this moment here, especially because she's bringing that leg back around behind her and reaching it out. And so she could throw a lot of momentum into the system right here, but she doesn't do that. And I think that's a fantastic choice at this moment. Because Ben is moving, and I don't think he would have been prepared for the sudden, really large increase in that momentum. And so I really like the choice that she makes to, rather than swing the leg around and forward, she rather brings it back and then just kind of places it. So she keeps the nice line, but rather than letting it swing all the way around, she lets it get most of the way around and then plants it to kind of nullify that.
Yeah, like
she absorbs it.
Become really popular recently for a follow to really swing that leg around and then squat back down on their standing leg and turn it into like a really intense ride.
Yep.
And so that's one of those things where if it's in your muscle memory, you need to learn how to shut it down when it's no longer musically appropriate to do.
Yep. Or not appropriate partner-wise.
Yes, also incredibly important.
And I think that's both of those things were kind of the case in this particular moment. I don't think Ben would have been ready for it, and I don't think musically it would have been appropriate. So really good choice by her to just kind of nullify that and absorb that momentum like on her own and redirect it.
Yeah. Ben would have found a way, though. He's really good at protecting his follow. So I want to talk about this prep through right here. So like I was talking about earlier, you really want to take energy out of the system. So that way a follow is essentially leading themselves forward completely under their own power. They're not using the connection as much. The connection is just like a verbal instruction almost, except just through the feel of the hand. And they can't use the connection to like fling themselves forward because you're not giving them that power. And the other thing that Ben is doing is really lovely prepping and shaping of her through her 1-2. And I just, again, want to highlight that he's not like rotating her hand in a dangerous way. So I would say err on the side of if the follow is already rotating their hand, let it happen, but don't force it from your end as a leader. That's bad news bears. But what he's allowing to happen is after she strikes her right foot on count 1, he's allowing her to really stay back weighted on that foot through the foot strike of count 2. So you can see how back weighted she is compared to the connection. And that isn't purely her technique. Obviously, that is what she is trained to do, but he is creating the situation in which that is possible by how he is placing the handhold. And you can see how the hand isn't traveling as far down the slot. It's doing just as much lateral movement as it is linear movement up and down the slot. The basic concept is like my follow is attached to my hand. If I bring my hand really close to my body after it being very far away from my body, a follow who is inclined to take large steps or a lower level follow who is inclined to rush will take that as an opportunity to rush or to travel really quickly.
Yeah.
So you kind of think of your handhold, the way they are attached to you, as your personal shield or like bubble. And as long as you keep your hand far enough away from your body, that's going to make a huge difference. And then the other thing that Ben is doing in this instance in particular is he is continuing to travel back on his two. So, like I was talking about at the very beginning, spacing is really important. And in general, follows need to be still on the original end of the slot relative to the partner on count two, as opposed to having completely caught up for them, or worse, having passed them already.
Mm-hmm.
And so by Ben continuing to travel on this count two, he's maintaining his bubble and allowing Stacey to have her comfortable space. So he's not forcing her to take smaller steps. He's accommodating it by making sure his handhold is way out ahead of him. He's doing more lateral prepping than linear, and he's not adding weight to the system or energy to the system that is unnecessary based on how responsive she is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And since we're talking about the steps that she's taking, I kind of want to talk about that for a second.
Yeah, go for it.
So there's an interesting explanation. So Stacey is very unique in like her styling, the way she looks. But what's interesting is she kind of combines some things for her technique here. So she's getting these really long strides because partially she's bending into that standing leg and reaching with the free leg, but then also, so because you were saying that she's back weighted, which is true, but she's not, she's back weighted as in she's weighted on her back foot, not so much that she's like really pitched backwards in that, like a lot of times you'll see a follow, if they're pitched backwards, like their center is back past, or like at the very edge of like their heel on the back foot. And that's not really what we're seeing here. So she's staying kind of over the center of the foot more so. So she's staying over this back foot, but because she's bending into the knee, and you can actually see she releases kind of that lower half of the abdomen. And that all just kind of helps her stay right on top of that back foot. So she's not pitching back past it. And that's why she's getting those long strides, because if you pitch and you are at the edge of the heel or back past it, you don't have as much you can't cover as much distance with that free foot. So I just wanted to talk about that briefly, because we were talking about how she takes really long strides, and she does it in a unique way.
Yeah.
I don't know if you just heard that car like honking outside.
I did. It wasn't too bad. I did not have a heart attack, so good times. So now we're going into a wrap, which is a great way to take energy out of a pass, because the follow has to redirect mid-pass. And so once again, you can see how Ben is really managing the spacing between them. So he's taking a really big step down the slot on count two with his right foot. So they are no closer than they were during their anchor. And then the great thing about a wrap is that the hand basically stops progressing until the follow has rotated and their right side starts coming forward. And so kind of built into a wrap is not a dissolve, but like a stopping point in the energy, where it can no longer keep going, or else someone would get hurt, probably. Someone would dislocate something. And it has this great resolution into a hip catch, which is another stopping point. So if you were to go back and rewatch this first dance in particular and pay attention to how there are really clear like periods at the end of sentences a lot in this dance. And there is very little opportunity for momentum to continue building and compounding on itself. And that's one of the things that A is musically appropriate, like whether or not you had a follow with large strides, this would be musically appropriate regardless. But it also really helps if you're trying to manage spacing with a follow with large strides like Stacey, or if you were dancing with a follow who rushes, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And then the last thing I want to talk about is the way Ben reaches for her right hip really fast out of this wrap.
Yeah.
So you can see his left hand is already crossing in front of his torso, reaching for it. So I would say right about here, the ends of his fingertips are on the center of her spine. And then as she turns, she's turning into his palm. So you can see by here, his palm is attached to her hip. So that way he is able to cushion and slow her into this sidestep right here. And that is so important. That's just phenomenal technique, regardless of who you're dancing. But again, in these circumstances, it can be extra helpful because you can apply more braking power over a longer period of time. So it feels really good for both of you and is a safe way to take energy out of the system and to add a stopping point.
Yeah.
And then we're just going to watch this because it's funny. Just the two of us. In case you weren't aware. I love it. I love it so much. All right. Okay. On to the second song. And I want to highlight that, I mean, the phrasing of both of these dances is genius. But this is now the fast song. This is Britney Spears' I'm a Slave for You. The first phrase of this song, Ben is keeping them mostly in closed position, doing pushes instead of passes. And he saves the first pass for the phrase change. And then afterwards takes time to reconnect. But like he uses a telemark pass as the first phrase change. And it is so powerful. I'm just gonna, where am I? Where is my cursor? Come back.
It ran away from me.
Yeah, so here, I'm just going to hold forward through this first phrase so you can see it kind of in context. So that was like a pass, but it was a send out. And we've got another push. And then it's a whip that turns into this. And that's the phrase change. And it's really impactful. And it goes to show the thing that like we harp on a lot here at Nerdy, especially in spotlights, is like less is more at the beginning of whatever spotlight you were dancing to. So you have somewhere to go. And like imagine if they had been going, and then he did that whip into a telemark in a slide, it would have been like, I mean, yeah, you hit the thing, but compared to what you were doing, that's not big enough.
Yeah.
All right, so now for the little details. So I want to highlight the direction in which Ben releases this passing tuck from close position. And instead of sending Stacey to the end of the slot, he is leading her to perpendicularly cross the slot in the release of the the passing tuck, sorry. And that is another really sneaky way to take energy out of the system. Because if he had released it straight down the slot, she probably would have had a lot of momentum and it would have affected their spacing afterwards. And then I also want to add, he's not really doing much. There's more energy in the prep of the tuck. And then it's just like he's relaxedly exhaling and just kind of letting his arm relax back to his side. He's not driving through it with a body lead at all. It is super chill and I'm here for it. All right. And then next we have another hitch timing. And that one's probably clearer to see because there is also like a musical emphasis on the hitch timing, especially from Stacey. So she is kicking back on count 1 and then syncopating and 2 really quickly underneath herself as she comes forward. And then Ben is doing something similar on the other side. He's basically doing a knee pop on count 1 and then collecting underneath himself for and 2. So count 1 is right here. And there's something really satisfying about how perfectly parallel their legs are. It's like, it's a genius. Anyways, so that's count 1. And then Ben is really quickly placing his right foot underneath him and then collecting his other foot in for count 2 because he's really trying to hit this really just vertical pose. And again, he's lifting that handhold like basically straight up because it's helping reduce the energy. Stacey doesn't have to travel as far because of it. It's helping dissolve because she did that huge kickball change. She could have launched out of frame on the other end of the slot if he had encouraged that.
Yeah. I was actually just going to talk about that briefly.
Go for it.
Because I would say that this particular styling is probably my least favorite choice in these 2 dances because it could get way out of hand really fast. Just because how stretched out she gets. She's getting like very overextended. And had Ben not come back to her and lifted the hand, it would have been like, she would have been almost tripping over herself to, move forward if he had given her a lot of momentum down the slot. But it wouldn't have cleanly resolved itself. It would have been a little chaotic because just how much she's stretched out and how overextended she gets, it can get very out of hand. So in the sense that like what they ended up doing with this, I like it. But in the sense that like in general, it could have gotten very out of hand very quickly.
And there are totally places where musically that would be appropriate. Like it'd be really fun to lead just a basic left side pass that arcs around for the follow and it becomes almost orbital, but musically not appropriate here.
Yeah.
And then I want to just really quickly highlight where Ben places his right foot right here is not perfectly underneath him. It's to his right a little bit. So that way he can bring his torso towards Stacey ever so slightly. And that gives him plenty of room to extend his arm straight up. If he had had the foot just a little bit further down the slot, he wouldn't have had as much rope in his arm to do the straight up. So it's kind of like the arm starts going up and the body comes towards it kind of thing as a leader.
Yeah. Can you go through and just kind of like circle once they connect with the hands, like just how far it moves in the path of the hand?
Yeah.
The connection.
All right. So it starts out conveniently right in front of Tebow's head. And then
it barely moves initially.
Yeah, it goes like that far and then it goes
up,
straight up. All right. Ghosting. Yeah.
Now, and this is what I was talking about, had been given a lot more like into the system and really, given her that momentum, his hand would have moved a lot further. And that's when it would have gotten out of hand. But I just wanted to point out, like, his hand is barely moving to get her to come forward because of how extended she is.
Yeah. And I think it's because the camera is also moving, it's being distorted just a tiny bit. So I think there's either a little bit more or a little less. I think it's a little bit more movement down the slot, but still, it's basically doing one of those. It's coming this way a little bit, and then the emphasis is on the up. You basically want the follow. This part is just to get the follow to start traveling forward. And as soon as their initiative is coming forward, and if you were to just let go of them, they'd keep going forward, it goes straight up after that. And it really doesn't take much when you have a strong center counterpoint that you've set up in the anchor beforehand. All you have to do is move that center counterpoint down the slot, maybe a centimeter or an inch, and a good follow will start moving. And you can see right here, as it goes from like right in front of Tebow's face, and it goes over like 2 frames, you can already see Stacey's right leg starting to bend, which means she has the initiative to come forward. And that's why it can go straight up. All right, so we've got this great phrase change. And so this is Ben being really specific to make sure that her power is purely rotational and has very little traveling to it. So his job, as he is bringing her left side through right here, he's basically posting her left side in this moment before kind of revving the engines, as it were, to keep her spinning. So that way she's hardly traveling at all. She's maybe traveling a half a step down line. So that way he can grab onto her hip and he can slide past it. His face is amazing. So I think way back in one of our very first episodes, I think we analyzed a great dance between Maxence and Alyssa Glanville. And we talked more at length about how momentum, in order to either resolve it or change it, often involves transitioning from linear to rotational or vice versa. So if you have a follow who is inclined to have a lot of linear power, as a leader, you can encourage that to be translated into rotational. So that way they're not traveling, but you can then use that power if you want to. It's fun. All right. And then I'm just a stickler for this because I don't know. It looks to me like Ben's hand is more around her waist than either her ribs or her hips. Personally, that would hurt me. So just do me and I'll follow as a favor that you under your hand is either ribs or hip and not mushy middle. So that way you're not applying force to organs.
Yeah. It looks like on her it's getting ribs, but
because especially this kind of thing, that's applying a fair amount of force to get that rotational energy. And I've had that happen where they're applying that to like my liver or my spleen. And I'm just like, that wasn't fun.
Yeah, I would suggest at least trying to get mostly on a bony part.
And do the one that's easier for you to reach for your height. So if you're shorter than the follow, aim for the hip. If you're a lot taller, aim for the ribs. This is also a really great freeze frame.
Yeah, I was just looking at that. I love how the screen has his full name on it.
Yeah.
Benjamin.
Yes, Benjamin. It reminds me of when I wrote for Rose City, and when Brad was in trouble, I'd have Forrest call him Bradford.
Yeah.
Love it. So we've seen this arc of the handhold kind of post a couple of times in this dance, and I want to address it for a number of reasons. One, it's great for the purposes of helping take energy out of the system, but I want to be really clear about why this is okay and what I experience in the wild so often is not okay.
You tell.
Because The timing of the hand lowering and reconnecting into a center counterpoint at the other end is really crucial. So the first thing to note is that as a leader, you should not be applying downward force to a hand until the follow's hand is in the front plane of their body. So if the follow's hand is directly to the side or behind their own body and you do apply force, ow, that's a wrestling move. So you need to make sure that they have turned enough that the handhold is slightly in front of their shoulder before you start bringing it down, because that's natural. Like, you can all test it right here. Put your hand out to the side and bring it down. You're like, it's only so far I can go. Take it even farther back and you're like, oh no, that's not good. But if it's in the front plane of your body, like, oh yeah, that's normal. That's pretending I'm running somewhere. That's fine. So as Stacey is turning to her right, the hand is lowering because of her to begin with, not because of him. So I would say from here to about here, she's 100% in charge of that hand coming down. He's not applying downward force because that would hurt her. And then as she continues to face him, it's now a shared point of connection. And Ben is applying downward pressure in the sense that his arm is just relaxing to his side. He is not trying to smush a person into the floor. Dribble a basketball. That's better. He's not trying to dribble a basketball really aggressively. He's just letting his arm, the natural weight of his arm, moving towards the floor. That's the downward force. So it's really gentle. And it can go down because they are close enough to each other. This is the other really important point. If at this point in time, Ben were to be any further away from her, it couldn't come down that far at all. It would have to stop at waist height. But because they are close enough to each other, and as she is rotating to her right side is actually coming closer to him a little bit, there is so much room in her rope, in her right arm, that without sacrificing her stance, the handhold can come down. If the follow is sacrificing their stance, like they're bending over or they're pitching forward or they're tipping over when you're bringing the handhold down, that means either you're applying too much downward force and or they are physically too far away from you. Okay, I think I have spoken my piece about that. I'm getting tired of yanked into the floor. Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wanted to add to that?
I think just what I want to add is that Stacey here is choosing to not like stall her moment, like facing away from him, not connecting with him. And I think that's important in this particular moment. Just I in general think that as a follow, you shouldn't take too terribly much time facing away from your lead, doing your own thing before reconnecting. I mean, obviously, sometimes it's great, but in general, it's nice to kind of have your moment and then reconnect. And I
like just right. It's
just
like in the pocket of just enough time.
Yeah.
Excellent. 2 more to go. Woo! So this is another instance of a calm center counterpoint with hitch timing. And then Ben dissolves the energy again with the hand coming up and basically does a dance monkey dance lead. So if you
it's like mild twerking.
Just mild. So while as a rule, I tend to hate dance monkey dance, it does have a place, a tiny place. It's like a 1 square foot little plot on like 100 acres. It's very small. But because of how the connection works to create it, basically lifting the handhold straight up and giving the follow free rein, it's taking energy out of the system, and it's encouraging her to not travel as far as fast. I mean, she has the option of just dancing a normal pass here if she wants, but she decides to take it and do her own thing, and then they have time to reconnect at the end. What are you laughing at?
I was just looking at Ben while he was doing that.
I know Ben's great. So good. But it's another tool you can have in the toolbox. So if you have a follow who enjoys doing their own thing, creating the space for it can be really great. And that's how you should be doing the dance monkey dance thing, is literally you just create space, but you don't force them to fill that space.
Mm-hmm.
If they don't, you just go straight back to what you were doing. It was just a normal pass. That's all it was. And that's fine. It's okay. But so let's go through the timing again. So this hitch timing is a little bit harder to see because neither of them are doing like a kick or a knee pop, but it's still very much the handhold is a center counterpoint, a little bit longer than you would normally. So Stacey is staying in the anchor past 6 and instead of starting to be redirected. So she's not striking perfectly on 1. She can if she wants to, but the way Ben is leading it is encouraging her to like, stay away from me, just a hair longer. And that helps take some energy out of the system. And once again, the handhold is doing like a little bit that way, and then it's going straight up. So one of those. I want to know which of the pros Ben's making eye contact with this moment, because you can tell it's somebody. Oh no. Now we're framing through it so we can see the delay from what's happening live versus what's happening over here. Oh, that's gonna mess with my head. Okay.
I know, I always hate that.
Okay, last one. So this is a fun instance of an acceleration, but if you watch it at speed, Ben is still doing the delayed hitch timing with the handhold. It's really cool. So on count 1, he's actually extending his arm because he's like, stay away from me just a little bit longer, just a little bit longer.
Yeah,
and
because
then
she has a lot of momentum.
Yeah. And then he's allowing her to come forward. And this is one of those things where if you don't realize that functionally that's what's happening, like why Ben is doing that, you might think, oh, this is how I lead that. I kind of shove the follow away from me first. Then I bring them towards me. And then as a follow, you're like, who am I? What do you want from me? But instead it's happening because of how much momentum she has through this rotation and how forward she is in her pitch. And Ben's just like, for us to hit this just right, stay away from me a hair longer. And he's using the power of his force field. He's just like keeping his hand further away from him because she's overextended. Like the human arm cannot just suddenly scrunch up in that direction, right? So just by nature of like keeping his hand further away from him, she has to slow down.
Yeah.
And it's great. So anyways, science. What have we learned? Pop quiz. I'm lying. I wasn't that prepared.
For some reason, that last comment that you made about her arm made me think of Inspector Gadget. And
Go Gadget arms.
No, but like, what would that be? Go Gadget, like retracto arm?
Go Gadget spring.
Anyways.
Yes. So, all right, real quick review of my main points, because I'm feeling like that kind of teacher tonight. As a leader, you can experience in general like one of two kinds of situations: either a follow who just in general dances with longer strides and they're not off time, they can just book it like Stacey or myself. I'm sorry, it's the long legs. It's hard to take very small steps. And then you can also have lesser skilled follows who are just rushing, don't understand how to connect into an anchor properly. But a lot of the solutions for that as a leader are the same. So you focus on taking energy out of the system instead of putting it into it. You reduce the energy from body leads, and you have that like bubble, your force field. They're attached to your hand. So as long as you keep your hand farther away from you, in theory, unless they're contorting themselves, they will not be able to get too close to you. Using a really calm hand center counterpoint, using that sneaky use of hitch timing in the handhold, staying in close position, having more pushes instead of passes, more trading places, basically having more periods in your sentences. Instead of run-on sentences, you want to have distinct sentences, not never-ending clauses. And then, but really, the reason why you're doing all of that is so that you can be in control of your spacing. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk.
Thanks for doing all the talking tonight.
You're welcome. I'm so glad I was smart tonight, considering I was like passed out 2 hours ago. It's very exciting.
Yeah.
Erin's like, never noticed you booking it. Not gonna lie. Because I've trained you well, sir. You know how to handle it.
Very true.
What's really funny is if you're the kind of follow who in general knows how to just be lower energy but has the ability to be explosive, and then you're dancing with someone and neither of you have danced with each other very often, and then they go and be like, lead something explosive, but you can tell they weren't expecting you to be that responsive. But then you're so much more responsive than they expected, and you both almost die. And then you just apologize.
Are you having
to each other
for that too?
I am. It's funny because nobody expects someone my size to be able to move that fast. And I'm like, if I'm led correctly, I am one of the fastest people in the room. My default is slow because it's tiring.
Yeah. To not get led.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So is it next time? Yeah, I think next time is our episode with the one, the only, the Phoenix Gray on October 13th. So excited.
It'll be a fun episode.
Yeah. Maybe by then his dance with Samir from Bridgetown will also be on the YouTubes and we can look at both. But other than that, definitely join our Patreon, because if you enjoyed how very hyper-specific and nerdy tonight was, that is our Patreon.
Yeah.
That's what we do on Patreon. So go join our Patreon. Yeah. I think all of the language has fallen out of my head. So
thank you for joining us. We shall see you next time.
And then I just love how it's probably the tiniest twerk Ben has ever done. When he turns his butt to the audience and like shakes his butt for a little while. I think that's the shortest duration I've ever seen out of a spotlight. It's hilarious. There's that one pattern in the first song where he's doing hip catch, and then he has both of her hips with his arms crossed. And that's one of those patterns that I wish I could lead. But because I have these speed bumps on the front of my body, they get in the way with the arm cross thing. So yeah.
That's unfortunate.
The things you don't think about, right?
Separate note, but Keaton's still in here right next to me, and I can hear her snoring. It's like bouncing off the floor.
That's amazing.
A lot louder.
It's a cat for people, in case you're like, there's someone snoring.
She snores all the time, but
there's something so cute about a cat snoring. Yeah, here's that thing that I can't do because, speed bumps. But this is now the fast song. This is Britney Spears, "I'm a Slave for You." I both love and hate this song. I am. I'm not gonna explain why I'm having flashbacks on a recorded format like this. I would say buy me a drink if you want to hear the story, but I don't drink, so y'all are screwed. Buy me chocolate? I don't know.